Hey everyone, a quick video today and less of a tutorial and more of maybe I guess a PSA. I'm not actually going to demonstrate any Avid techniques here, but just a quick reminder about editing in general. This is something I have to remind my students of sometimes that they forget about. It's really easy to get hung up on the technology and the software. And particularly when you're first starting out, there can be a big learning curve. You have to make sure you know what you're doing, and you might have ideas of, oh, I know what I want to do, how do I do it? And a lot of the tutorials I have on here and the questions people post on my page are about specific technical issues they've encountered and things that you might need to know your way around. And that's an important part of learning to be a good editor, is understanding your tools and how to use them well and how to use them efficiently and how to solve problems you may run into, because that's part of the job. But what I wanted to say today is just a quick reminder that that's just the tools. That's not really what editing is about. And editing is really about creativity and storytelling and figuring out, how do I take these images and sounds and put them together into something compelling or entertaining or educational, or whatever your goal is that you're trying to do with it. Or if it's a narrative piece, how do I put this together in a way that tells the story the best way possible and conveys the emotions and makes the audience feel how I want them to feel and helps them follow the plot and so on. If it's an educational piece, how do I make sure I'm showing them the things that are going to give them the information they need? If it's a commercial, how am I making the product look good? How am I conveying the value of it or why someone should want to purchase it? All of those things. And that's really what editing is about. And so just a quick reminder, that's really what we're trying to do here. And all the details of what you're doing in Avid or Premiere or wherever you're editing, and all the different techniques and shortcuts and stuff, those are things that are going to help you do that more efficiently, help you do that better. And really the goal is to get to the point where you're not thinking about that and you're just comfortable with it and doing things smoothly. I would liken it to driving a car, which it's been said is one of the more complex things that most of us will do in our lifetime. And if you remember when you first start driving, it's really scary and there's so much going on and so many things to pay attention to, and you can kind of get overwhelmed with that. And after you've been driving 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you're not thinking about all that. It's just sort of second nature, and you're focusing on what's on the road, where am I trying to get to, but you're not thinking about like, oh, I have to move my hand here to turn the signal on, and I have to turn the wheel this much, and I have to push down this hard on the gas pedal. Think of editing the same way. Your goal with the software is to get to the point where you're not thinking about the software, you're just doing the creative thing you are trying to do, and it is helping you do that. And that's really basic, but it is something that it's easy to get lost in, particularly when you're starting out. And I know a lot of people watching this channel are trying to learn Avid and get started in editing. And yes, there are going to be some struggles and some technical problems you'll run into, and you have to find your way around those and learn the right way to do things so that you can use the tool well. But remember, that's not the end goal. The end goal is to get comfortable using this tool to do your creative work. And just to end, I'll share a quick anecdote. I am not a full-time editor. I am a teacher. That's my main job. But in the world of film, that's one of the things that I'm pretty comfortable with and do. And I've worked on a number of different projects as an editor. There was one time I was in my office working with a colleague of mine who had directed a film, and I was editing it for her. And we were looking at a cut and talking through it and making some changes. And I had some students come by that needed to talk to me, and they're kind of standing there watching for a minute as we finished up the section we were working on, what we were talking about. And one of them said, like, this is the first time I actually understand what editing is supposed to look like. And I said, what do you mean? I know you've edited stuff too. She said, well, I'm listening to you guys and you guys just talking about the story and how the pacing is working and what the rhythm of this scene is. And you're just making that happen as it goes. And I thought that was actually pretty profound. And again, I'm not saying because I'm the world's greatest editor, but it's because I'm competent and I understand the tool. And that was the conversation I was having with the director, because that's the conversation you want to be having. Be like, well, what if this played a little differently? And we're just sort of doing that on the fly as it's going. And what I understood from the student was she was still in that early phase. We're just kind of learning. And every time she'd either been editing or been working with an editor on something, they were still in the phase where they're kind of learning the technology and like, okay, let's try this. And they have to stop and think and process, okay, how do I do that? Okay, I need to open this window and move this over here. And there's always just that little bit of layer of the technology in the way. That's perfectly natural. And that's how everyone starts. But she kind of saw this is the goal of what we're getting to, is to not be thinking about the technology at all. And I realize this is kind of a weird video to post on a channel that's largely software tutorials on how to use these things. But that's also part of the reason I do this, is if you're somebody who wants to be an editor, I want you to understand how to use the tool and get your questions answered and be able to do that effectively. And then you practice with it so that you can get to that point where you really are focused on the important stuff, which is the creative, and not having to worry about the software and all that kind of stuff. So that's my message for today. I realize this is slightly more philosophical, a little more PSA than a tutorial. Promise next time we'll be back to the usual, here's how you do this thing in Avid, because I know that's something people have questions about and that I'm trying to help everyone work through. But just remember, if you're struggling with the software, that's okay, that's normal, and that's something we all have to push through, and you're doing the right thing, watching tutorials, finding the answers to your questions. But remember, that's not the goal. Anybody can learn how to use the software. What really makes you an editor is understanding why you're doing what you're doing and making good creative decisions with that tool. So I wish you all good luck in your editing, and I will see you next time.